but you're really foolish if you don't believe in conspiracies.
Yeah.
Because just how many of them have to be proven true before you go, maybe I should reassess my position on these things?
That's 62 years after the JFK assassination, and we're
Right.
still learning new information.
Yeah.
Information that's been kept from us.
And still
all
being
these
kept.
years.
There's still a lot of it. I mean, they were
Sure.
supposed to. That was one of the more disappointing things about this administration. Like immediately, right off the jump, we're supposed to get all the CIA files, all the JFK files. We're supposed to know exactly what happened to him. We know very little. Very little new information has been released that illuminates any aspects of that case.
Yeah. It's a shame.
Yeah, it's terrible because most likely, at least some part of our government was involved in assassinating the president. And no one went to jail.
No.
Nothing happened. And in fact, people succeeded and thrived after that.
Sad truth.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
I mean, it goes back. There's so many cases. Like, I've had conversations with people that, like, they don't want to be fools, right? So that's a lot of the people that don't want to believe in conspiracies. Like, most of it can be explained away by incompetence or coincidence and this and that. Like, that's not even true. It's not even most of it. It's some things can be explained
Some
away.
things. I had a friend at the agency. He was one of my first bosses, and he had started out in this like internship program that the agency had. You had to be working on a master's degree. But anyway, his first assignment was in the Counterintelligence Center, which at the time was being run by James Angleton. And on his first day, the secretary walked him around and, this is what we do over here and this is what we do over there. And there was this entire wall of file folders. And she said, whatever you do, don't look in those folders. You're not cleared for that. Well, he said, well, of course, the very first minute that he's left alone, he runs and looks in the folders. And he said every single one of those folders was on an American citizen. And the CIA is forbidden by law from spying on Americans.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
The crazy thing, too, in a lot of people's eyes is the difference between what they thought of, what the narrative is of the Obama administration in terms of like whistleblowers and like what the hope was. It was hope and change, right?
Oh, hope and change. And you know the statistic. The Espionage Act was written in 1917 to combat German saboteurs during the First World War. Between 1917 and 2009, 3 Americans were charged with espionage for speaking to the media. Under Barack Obama, 8 people were charged with espionage for speaking to the media. So he was the enemy of whistleblowers.
Not only that, that was part of his campaign.
Yeah.
Part of his campaign was protection of whistleblowers.
Absolutely.
In fact, it was in the Hope and Change website.
Yeah, well, look at the Dashti Lely massacre that I mentioned earlier. It was part of his campaign to open an investigation of Dashti Lely. What happened was at Dashti Lely, Afghanistan, on November the 30th and December the 1st, 2001, 2,000 Taliban soldiers gave up en masse, right? And the Northern Alliance called us and said, what do we do with all these guys? We don't have room for them. So we told them, put them in trucks, take them out to the desert, and just hold them there until we can divide them up and send them to smaller jails all around the country. And if we have to, we can send some to Pakistan. But there were no air holes in the containers. There was no food. There was no water. And of the 2,000, 14 survived. And one of the 14 said that when they opened the trucks in the desert, the bodies fell out like sardines from a can. So Barack Obama said in 2008, if he's elected president, he's going to investigate this massacre and get to the bottom of it. And then there was nothing. So I said to John Kerry, I said, listen, this is part of the Obama campaign. Let me go to Afghanistan and investigate this thing. And so I went, and there are still bones just sticking out of the sand. There are clothes that have just been laying there in the desert all these years. All the bodies are still there, what's left of them.
Really?
Yeah, it's grisly. So I come back and I get a call from a kind of a prominent human rights activist, and he said he wanted to see me, but it had to be private. So we went to Johns Hopkins University. There was a classroom that wasn't being used. We met there, and he said, listen, I have a witness who was 12 years old at the time, and he was hiding behind a rock, and he saw what happened when they opened the trucks and the bodies fell out. I said, okay. And he said, but what's new is he says that there were two men there wearing blue jeans and black T-shirts, and they were speaking English. I said, okay, that's all I need. So I wrote a letter to the agency, and I asked, for clarification, were any CIA personnel on site at the box up or at the location where the trucks were opened? And I had it auto-penned, John Kerry, chairman. 6 weeks later, a colleague comes into my office and he says, hey, you got a response from the agency to your letter. I said, I didn't see any response from the agency. I just checked my mail an hour ago. And he said, they classified it top secret. It's down in the vault. I said, top secret? I said, well, what did it say? And he says, it says, go fuck yourself. I said, great. That's how they want to play it. So I went to Kerry, and Kerry says, we're stirring up a hornet's nest here, and I think we should just let this fade into history. I was like, again? Because you want so badly to be Secretary of State. Again.
God, what a gross business.
It's awful. Hideous.
What is it like for you on the outside now, watching what's going on in the world?
There are some places that I'm optimistic about. And actually, there are some developments that may look ugly on the surface that I'm optimistic about. First of all, this ceasefire, we're recording this on, I guess today's Thursday, but the ceasefire that was announced this morning, this is huge, huge. And I think this is not a victory for the Israelis. I think that it makes Donald Trump stronger and Benjamin Netanyahu weaker. Netanyahu's decision to bomb Qatar was too much. Just too much. It could have served to embarrass the president. What it ended up doing is it weakened Netanyahu's position. So that's a victory for the White House, as far as I'm concerned.
Can I stop you real quick?
Yeah.
The correct pronunciation? How did you say it?
Qatar.
You said gutter.
It's back here. It's called a qaf.
But so
Qatar.
I've heard cutter.
Yeah,
it's not cutter, but you're saying it like a G?
They use a G sound.
Gutter.
Other Arabs would call it Qatar with a K.
Uh-huh.
But in the Gulf dialect, it's way down here. Qatar.
Qatar.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The other thing is Iran. Man, I follow Iran more closely than anybody I know. You remember, you're a little bit younger than I am, but not much. When we were kids, we had a terrible relationship with China. And Richard Nixon was the most anti-China person that could possibly have been elected president. Yet it was Nixon that went to China and made peace with the Chinese and opened diplomatic relations. And call me crazy, but I think that if there's going to be peace with Iran, Donald Trump's going to make that peace with Iran. It may not be in the form of a trip to Tehran, but I could see a trip to Riyadh and have a meeting brokered by Mohammed bin Salman, and maybe we can come to some sort of an agreement on issue number 1 or issue number 2.
Well, it seems to be a part of what he wants to accomplish in these 4 years, is that he wants to go down as having made significant change in the world in a positive direction.
And we're seeing it, whether people want to admit it or not.
That's part of the problem because of narratives.
That's it. Peace between India and Pakistan doesn't fit in the Democratic Party's narrative that Donald Trump is a warmonger. He's not a warmonger. Ask, the Africans that he's weighed in for, and we have peace in sub-Saharan Africa now. Or this agreement today between Hamas and the Israelis. I think this is the first of several new developments that's going to lead to the end of this conflict.
What is your take on Netanyahu's position? Because if war is over Netanyahu will no longer be running Israel. Is that correct?